Greetings from Hopalong Hollow. This is Jeri, and it is October 12th. And I'm sitting here on the ground in the potager, just taking stock of what is going on around here. And as you can see, I am up to another project. First of all, I've got to clean out the potager of all the dead vegetation. The beans are coming down, the tomato plants are coming down. I've got a lot of strawberries to split up, and I've been taking things apart, as you can see right here. This is one of the bee houses, the inner parts of the bee house. And over there, where there were peas growing earlier in the year, right there, I have a plan. We have a construction site going here, and my latest plan, my latest idea is to build right there something by myself. I want to do this on my own, just to see if I can. I want to take those old windows, and of course you guessed it, I want to build a very small greenhouse. As someone who's been gardening for over 30 years, probably longer than that if you count my younger adventures into gardening, I'm still an amateur gardener and always will be. But surprisingly, I have never had a greenhouse, with the exception of a cold frame and then mini greenhouse made from these old windows. I've never had a proper greenhouse. Well, you know, it always comes down to it. Eventually, if you're a gardener, you end up wanting and dreaming of a greenhouse. The greenhouse of my dreams. But James said he'd build me one next year. That probably will be the greenhouse of my dreams. This is just something small so I can learn how to use a greenhouse properly, and for me to start some seedlings earlier than I would if I were in the house, and not having just to use my mini greenhouses, which I'll still use. But I'm kind of excited about taking on this project on my own. So I'm going to show you a lot of the messes that are going on today, because I have been moving timbers and bricks and sidewalks in order to accommodate the space of this little greenhouse right here. So this should be a fun adventure, a learning experience for me at least. See what I can do. And a wonderful use of salvage that we have here anyway. It's not going to cost much money at all. Maybe for some 2x4s and a polycarbonate roof, I think. I'm not going to use glass windows for the roof. But right now I'm going to take this little space and I'm going to fill it with gravel, and I'm going to take you on this journey with me, so I hope you enjoy it. First job was clearing out a lot of the spaces and trying to get some semblance of order here, because I cannot stand to work in chaos. So I did move the sidewalk that was over here. I pulled up the brick walkway to give myself more space for the greenhouse, which is only going to be 6 foot by 8 foot, but nevertheless that's pretty good size for someone who has very little carpentry skill. To do is repair, reglaze, clean, and paint all these old windows. Now I have plenty of experience doing that, because I did it with every window in this old house. I've done it with the cold frame, and it's not one of my favorite jobs, but I want this to be pretty secure. I don't want any panes of glass falling out. It's simply a matter of figuring out how to lay all this out, and I'm going to need my husband's input on a lot of things. I don't want him to help me with this project as far as physically, because he just spent 3 months rebuilding our bridge, and I really would love to try to do this on my own. So he will give me any advice that I may need on learning how to do certain things like framing. I'm not very good at that. And other than that, I'm doing this by myself. I'm also doing it by myself for another reason. If you're a woman, particularly a woman, maybe you're a single woman, maybe you don't have somebody in your life that can help you with building projects, but you really want a little shed, or maybe just a storage shed, or even a doghouse, you really need to learn how to use tools and learn some basic carpentry skills. And because I am not experienced, but I'm going to do this on my own, I think this will be kind of encouraging for people who would love to build something, but they don't think they can. I always encourage women to have their own set of tools. I've had my own tools for years. I know how to use saws and drills and jigsaws and all the sawzalls and circular saws. I know how to use all those things. I've been using them for years. So it's important to know how to do that. Here in my workbook, I've written down all the items that I already have access to and their sizes. and probably things that I might have to purchase. Well, I know I will. I don't have enough 2x4s, and I don't have any polycarbonate panels. So I want to know how much this is going to cost in the end, and what do I need to finish the project. And then I have a pretty unprofessional little sketch here that I've done of what I'm hoping this will turn out to look like somehow. I want to use the old doors for my base right here, and then I actually do have plenty of windows. I want to do a polycarbonate roof, and then I have an antique door. I've got a French door, but I've also got a screen door with no screen in it, which could probably be either filled in with glass or polycarbonate, most likely. And I've got enough glass to go over on this side too. So this is the basic plan. I hope it turns out somewhat similar to this, if not a little more rickety. But my first job is going to be sanding and glazing, reglazing all the windows and sanding down the doors, and I'll probably paint everything in advance. So one of the things I started out with today was getting the gravel for the foundation on which to lay all my 4x6s, which is going to be my footprint here. And we just had a lot of this gravel and stone left over from when James did the bridge. And so I've been hauling it by pulling the lawnmower over with the cart and loading 3 buckets at a time, because that's what I can manage. And it's probably taken me about 3 or 4 hours to get to this point. But this is one of those tedious things that has to be done in order to have a firm foundation here. So that much I do know. And the next step I will be leveling all this ground out. So, I'm really glad to get this part over with. So now I'm going to lay some more stone down here, relay the walkway so that it is more even with the greenhouse foundation, which is looking pretty good. I still have to square it off a bit. Something else interesting to add to my little greenhouse somehow, maybe inside or outside, not sure. I had these corbels in the barn, and I was going to add those somehow to the design. Coming along pretty good. Now I'm into the fun part. I get to lay the walkways, and pretty soon I get to start actually building this thing. Today, when I realized that my foundation was not square, I was off by 3 inches on that back corner right there. So I had to remove my entire brick walkway and move it over on the end 3 inches, which means I had to pull up all the bricks. I was so happy with that brick walkway, but you know what? I'm glad it happened. I like the brick walkway better now, and now I know that my foundation is square and ready for some action. So sometimes these things happen, and you just learn to be a little more patient and be a little more careful when you're doing measurements. So another thing I have access to right now are these 5 antique doors. They're all identical, just like this. I got these years ago out of a house they were tearing down. Didn't know what I was going to do with them. I've stored them away in the barn for many years, but now I have a perfectly wonderful use for them. But on most of them, the edges are rotting out like this. So the first thing I'm going to do is cut off 1.5 inches off the top, the edge of each door. I've had to remove all the hardware off the doors, which I really like this old hardware. And if I can't think of any other use for it, I'm going to put it right back on the doors after they're painted, because I really like the look of that. Now I'm going to be trimming 1.5 inches off of each long length, and probably another inch off the top and the bottom, just to give me nice even boards. So I'm using my husband's little circular saw for that, which is easily manageable for me. One thing about power tools, though, is, and he keeps on telling me this, you have to be so careful. Think about everything you're doing. And that is true. Cannot be casual and careless when you're using these tools. Got me a new saw for myself right there. It's really working really well. And I'm not using his anymore. And here I have an old door that I'm working pretty hard to get to, because sometimes you do have to do a little bit of work in order to get your salvaged wood in shape. This door has all kinds of bits and pieces nailed to it for some reason. But underneath all that is a solid wood door, really great old door. So this is going to be one of my walls. And this is, I'm just so glad that I purchased all these doors so many years ago, not knowing what I was going to do with them. Well, when you're using salvage material, you're going to find a lot of problems with it. So, for example, as you can see, this door looks like it's been hit with a BB gun about 20 or 30 times. But that can easily be fixed with wood putty and then painted over, sanded and painted over. Of course, all the rough edges are going to be trimmed down. And this one is the same door, and it obviously was a target for a BB gun shooter. But good grief, who knows? I'm having a hard time right now getting off these rusted hinges. They are so rotten. I've sprayed them with WD-40, but there must be a trick in getting those off. Hey, everything I've done so far has been sort of tedious, but necessary. So sanding down the doors. I think I'll paint them before I put this together. These doors, oh, they're great. They're absolutely great doors. So I think what I had to do here is I had to piece the front together in order for it to go my full 9 feet across. The doors were, of course, not going to fit exactly, but I was able to cut them in a way that when I put these together, it all looks like one continuous symmetrical pattern on the panels. So it looks pretty darn good. I'm pretty happy about that. Now these doors would be beautiful with just a waterproofing stain on them and the natural wood showing through, but I don't want to do that. I want to match the trim on the house, which is kind of an off-white. So I'm actually going to paint this, and this is the bottom of the greenhouse, because my glass is not going all the way down to the floor. My glass is starting at about 30 inches up. And like a puzzle you have to put together, because you often don't find matching windows and you often don't find matching doors. I'm lucky that all my doors match, but most of my windows, I might have pairs of windows, but in some cases I only have one of a particular size. So it's going to be, this is a mess. It's going to be really fun trying to figure out how to make this all work together. But it will work together, I promise. Just as a dry run, I started piecing things together, putting up the framework here of the doors. The doors are my framework. And then, of course, I'm adding 2x4s as well. But then I wanted to see what the windows were going to look like, and I started placing the windows in way ahead of schedule, just to see how they were going to fit and how I was going to configure these 2x4s. So this isn't permanent. I'll take it all apart again. But so far so good. I'm pretty happy with the way it's fitting together. It's really kind of fun. I have lots of broken glass. I was going to redo the windows before I put them up, but then I decided, you know what, it might be easier to do it when they're in place, to get them clean and everything. So obviously this is not your traditional way of framing. You would be framing, putting these 2x4s in before you did anything else, but I can't do it that way because my frame is really my doors, and I'm building my other frame for my windows upon my doors. So of course I'm not a carpenter, so I'm probably doing everything the wrong way. But as long as it stands up and it's sturdy and it holds up to the wind, I really don't care if I'm not doing it the proper way, because I rarely do anything the way I'm supposed to. But hey, wow, I'm happy. I'm pretty happy so far. I like it. I really do. Beautiful little door. This is only 27 inches wide, and about 70 inches tall. I can cut some off the top if I wish. What I really wanted though was some glass in the door. So I'm going to remove these top 3 panels and replace them with glass to let even more light in. I took the top 3 panels out of the solid little door, my door that I'm going to use actually to go in and out with, a real door. I will replace those with glass. I'll sand it down either plexiglass or real glass, or maybe even stained glass, because I've got a friend right down the road who is a stained glass artist, and maybe she can make me something special for that. One of the jobs I really don't like is sanding down the windows, and this one's in pretty bad caked red paint. Okay, so this window is one of my tall skinny ones that I really like, but it's rotted out here on the top. So I'm going to take my saw and I'm going to cut it down to about 1 inch. And hopefully there won't be any rot underneath that. Not sure yet, but if it's okay, I will just add another piece of wood on top and put it together to make the window the 36 inches that it needs to be in order to fit. If the piece is rotted all the way through, I'll just have to replace the whole piece. That'll be a lot more difficult because I'll have to make slots for the glass to fit in, and I don't really have the tools to do that. A cocoon. Just put that somewhere else. Little cocoon. Put it in there. Okay. Now very little is going to waste here. This is the 1.5 inch edge that I took off the wooden doors. So I have a lot of these. And most of them are still in pretty good shape. Pretty solid. Some of them had rot, but I cut that away. But I'm using these to trim this area between the window and the door frame here and close that gap. I'm going to caulk that as well, but I also want to cover it up. So I'm going to use it as trim, such as I have right here. And it's going to be a pretty small, short sill. But there's something that I want to place on that little sill. So I'm adding a little more architectural interest in this way. When I'm cutting into the old wood or the windowsills, I'm always drilling my hole, my screw hole first. And that's just to keep the wood from cracking and giving me a nice, I just don't want this wood splitting, especially on those old windows. I should make it pretty clear that this is not a DIY tutorial on how to build a greenhouse. This is just how I'm doing this one, and basically I am winging it. I am not a professional builder by any means. I'm not a carpenter. I'm just trying to make this as sturdy and strong as I can using the skills that I do have, which I don't have a lot of expertise, but I do know a few things, and I do have my own tools. I have for years. I've been building things for years. I've been using tools for ever since I was in my 20s. And I do have a nice little collection here of tools, which are all pretty good. They're just mid-price tools, nothing too expensive. I'm using a Sawzall. I'm using a circular saw, jigsaw, several different drills with many, many different bits, several different kinds of sanders, and of course you're going to have your squares and your tape measures and lots and lots of sandpaper if you're using the old windows. So the first thing that I've done, as you can see here, is I started out by putting down the foundation. A nice firm foundation. I'd say this gravel is probably 5 to 6 inches deep. The whole thing was level and square. At least it was. Right now it's quite a mess. And then I began to put my walls in, my lower walls, using these antique doors, which have been sanded, repaired, and painted. So that in itself is not a standard way of building a frame, because normally you're going to build your frame from 2x4s. I'm putting the 2x4s in after I've fitted the windows, after I've laid down the doors, because my windows are fitting side by side, whereas some people that build these, they build a frame and then they fit the window right into the frame. Well, I'm not doing mine that way. Okay, here's the construction site, but I think I like it. I think it's coming together pretty well. The roof is a lean-to, and it's going to use polycarbonate roofing, greenhouse roofing, and this is part of the support system for the roof, attached directly to the house. Well, I puttied and sanded the BB gun holes in this particular section of door. If you're using salvage, as I mentioned before, if you're using salvage windows, which were probably pretty inexpensive or free, you may have a few kinks to work out. A lot of the times you'll have rotted wood, or your pieces are too short to fit. You'll have to add a sliver of wood, you'll have to caulk them, you'll have to use wood putty. You have to do all sorts of things to make them fit, because this is not like a standard carpentry job. This is something where everything is just a little bit off. Nothing fits perfectly unless you got perfect windows to work with, which I certainly don't. And so you have a lot of kinks to work out, and that's kind of the challenge and the fun part about this. Force this, and it is sturdy. It is solid. I'm pretty pleased about that fact. The roof isn't on yet, but the roof is extremely light. But the building itself, the structure itself, at this point is really, really rock solid. I'm in unfamiliar territory, and that is framing my door in. I have not a clue how to do that. Well, I have a couple ideas, but I'm going to get advice from James on this part, because I don't want my door to be off kilter. Well, I've been working on the door, and it's not nearly as difficult as I thought it was. But a lot of things really needed maneuvering around. Some of the windows were beautiful. They went together just perfectly. And others were pretty tricky because they were crooked and they were broken and they had some rot in them. But I had only had that problem with 1 or 2 windows. But there are ways to fix it, which I will show what I did in the next video. But I want to stop the video here because I still have a few days left of working on this, and I don't want to make this too long. So I'm getting ready to do the rafters, and that's the exciting part, because until the roof comes on, it just doesn't seem real. To see what it was going to look like, the angle that is, I put a couple lightweight boards down just to get an idea of what kind of it's a pretty nice angle. I really like that angle. It's not too steep, but it's not too flat. And once that roof goes on, it's going to really feel like a greenhouse. Right now it feels more like a glass box, like a glass shoe box or something. Now all these hand tools that I've been using have been great. They're all battery operated, so we have lots of batteries. And the only thing run on a cord is one of the sanders, the small sander over there, and the chop saw on the porch. Other than that, everything runs on a battery. And I've used, more than anything, I've used my drills and my circular saw and, of course, my sanders. And those are pretty much essentials when it comes to something like this. Chop saw's been great, too. So, I think we will end the video right here. And the next one, by the time you see this next time, this will be finished. So I'm very excited to go get some roofing. tomorrow or the next day and put the finishing touches on the outside and maybe get something done on the inside too. It's about 3/4 of the way finished, and I'm pretty pleased with it so far. It really hasn't been that big of a task. A lot of tedious work still needs to be done, like all the windows need to be caulked. I was going to do that first thing, but I decided it would be easier if they were already in, and I got impatient to see what it was going to look like. So the roofing, the windows, what else? Oh, all the little things, all the cleanup, all the painting. Now I've been painting this as I go, and normally I wouldn't have a white building. Very odd for me to have any white walls or white buildings around here because I love color. But this will have some trim on it, so that's to be expected. But I really did want a traditional white greenhouse to match the trim on our porch. Okay, so from Hopalong Hollow, this is Jeri, and I'll see you next time in the finished greenhouse. Bye-bye. Getting there.